Hello, and welcome back to another episode of To Whom It May Concern. I'm your host, Malak, here with my co-hosts, Mariam, Khawaila, Inara, and Rifa.
Hey, hello.
So I had an interesting assignment this week in my ethics class that I wanted to share with you ladies. So basically, there's this scientist. He was really important in gene therapy. His name was French Anderson. So he was making great strides in science, but he had a coworker with 2 twin daughters. And he was charged with, and he was found guilty actually, of molesting one of the twins. So there was just a series of pieces of evidence actually that kind of implicated him. They could have went both ways, but whether he was guilty of that crime or not, there was definitely an inappropriate relationship going on. Like that much was evident. So a lot of scientists came together and they created a foundation where they were explicitly saying that he's innocent, and if he's not innocent, he shouldn't be serving a sentence because of the great lengths he does in science. Like everything that he's done should outweigh the crime. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's a pretty messed up situation. So you have a whole foundation coming together that says even if he is guilty, the work he does for the greater good should negate all crimes that he committed.
Yeah, so the gist of the assignment was, can you differentiate between a person's personal ethics and morals and the ethics and morals they go by in their work? Like, should we separate the two, and do we even really have any business prying into other people's personal lives?
Well, going back into your case, I do not like that precedent that it sends if he were to be removed from all punishment. Because we're just saying to society now, if you do enough good or you're in such a high place in society, then go ahead, commit any crime you want. You're good.
Yeah, I guess for them it's kind of thinking of, well, look at the loss the science community will take if this man has to serve prison time.
And look at the loss humanity will take if you allow him not to.
It's a difficult situation in that because he does so much good, but then also does so much harm to people. So that's what makes it hard. But I feel like sometimes we do that a lot when we pry into people's backgrounds to see what their thoughts or views are or how their life is, especially with like politicians. I mean, it's kind of not like the situation now, but before it's like, oh, how was your married life or your kids? And like the entire family was scrutinized if someone wanted to go into politics. And I always thought that was unnecessary. Or like, I see the argument when it's like, okay, I'm a teacher. What I teach is fine. What does it matter what I do outside of my teaching? But I guess that also
parents say is like, a lot of parents say, do as I say, not what I do.
You guys, but this is totally different.
It's just different when it's
talking
illegal.
About a guy who's molesting a 13-year-old.
But that's different when it's illegal or, yeah, exactly, or unethical.
I don't even think it matters just on the legality of the situation. I think we should concern ourselves with what people are doing in their personal life if it's affecting other people. Like if I claim I'm a Democrat or something and I go home and I'm Republican, it's different than if I'm going home committing crimes against others and I come to work and I seem perfectly normal.
No, or you're talking about like if I smoke marijuana, it's not harming other people, but maybe it's something that others might think it's unethical.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe so much if this didn't have any influence on anybody else, maybe there's room for argument there. But the fact that another little girl was harmed, somebody vulnerable, someone that can't, fight for themselves, for me, it was a complete, absolutely not.
I think to have that sort of opinion where you think someone can separate who they are essentially is kind of what you're banking on. That people can separate out their lives and show different aspects of themselves in different situations. And should that be a thing that people should be able to do?
I mean, I feel like we do that normally anyways. We are not...
Dude, there's a difference between are you a murderer at home?
Yeah.
There's a difference between that and like being a complete normal person and you have arguments here and there. Like
No, obviously I agree. He molested a kid. That's completely wrong. But we do that in a sense where we act differently in front of other people, or what I do at work, I don't do at home, or what I do at home, I don't do at work.
Yeah, there's like a professional persona that you may have.
Yeah. But my morals and values will be consistent throughout. Exactly. Like that is not going to change.
Well, yeah.
Like I'm not going to be completely different.
No, so you can't.
But personality traits, maybe I'm more relaxed at home than I am at work, but I don't.
So I guess that goes down to say what is each person's morals, though. Do you think morality and ethics is universal?
No.
I think there should be a standard of what we all agree on, though. But rape is a no-no.
Yeah, but there are
murder is a no-no.
Exactly.
Okay, those are big, out of the question. Obviously, if someone does something like that, we're not going to question, yeah, that's wrong. I'm talking about, the nuanced things. Like drugs. Some people think it's just myself. I'm smoking marijuana, but others think it's unethical.
I think it goes back to the law. So that's why we have certain rules put in place.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say the law is absolute. As we see, it changes throughout the years. Like, the law isn't absolute. There's when people equate like morality to what the law is, like that's
And
that's
I
completely
think
wrong, because oftentimes the law isn't moral, and after a certain amount of years it'll change, and so it's like, was it moral at one point and now it's not moral, or was it not moral at one point and now it is? So it's like
Like it fluctuates.
Well,
Yeah.
it's always changing, and so are people's like circumstances. So maybe at that time and point, that law wasn't needed. But then again, that's why we have the ability to go back and fight against certain laws to make that change if we feel like that is unethical. But even taking it further, like in our workplaces, there are general ethics and policies that we must follow. So it's not very subjective to your own morals and values and what you want to do.
So that's true, because the introduction to this class, the class that I'm taking is ethics in research. So it's supposed to be specific to scientists doing research, etc. But the introduction to the class was actually like, are the ethics and standards that we have at our jobs enough to consider you an ethical and moral person? So if I'm just following the ethics and the moral codes professionally,
science.
of science,
like if my research I'm conducting is ethical.
exactly, does that make me an ethical or morally correct person? Because, for instance, I can conduct an experiment or research or whatnot, and there's nothing wrong with what I'm conducting, but the way I may be conducting it or the way I may be going about things isn't considered ethical necessarily. But does that mean, like, can I consider myself an ethical person or not an ethical person or an unethical person?
Or like
I think you can't be deemed like an ethical person or a non-ethical person. I think we're more complex than that, but I think like situations, how you react in those situations, was it ethical or was it unethical? So it's like, I don't know, I don't think one specific thing can like determine how you are.
I like that, because that's taking it away from the person and bringing it back. Don't hate the person, hate the action that was had.
Yeah, and everything is circumstantial, but people do have tendencies. So, like, depending on the circumstances, some people act this way, other people act that way, depending on what their tendency is. But I don't know, it's difficult to say because, yeah, let's say I'm conducting a perfect experiment or some research, but then I go stealing. That's two separate things, but should one overcome the other?
I think it's a spectrum. Bringing it back to Inada's point when she said that the law is a good standard to have, at least objectively. So we do know, like, the law reflects society and society reflects the law, and they're kind of go hand in hand already. So to have that as like a basic objective standard, like no stealing, no murder, no rape, I feel like that's a good standard to have.
I think ethics and morals are it's a higher standard than legal or legality.
Should it be a higher standard than legality?
It should. I think they should be hand in hand, honestly.
Legal, like,
No.
the law is like, this is the worst thing you could do, and this is like not allowed. But if you have
A higher
morals and
I think the bar is
ethics,
higher.
yeah. Like, I'll give you an example. So, like, Islamically, like, husbands have certain rights, women have certain rights. Usually, you'll hear a sheikh say, the only time you really go back to that if your marriage is, like, falling apart and you're like, what are my rights? But naturally, you should just want to be a good husband. You shouldn't go back to the baseline, because that's when you know you're really having issues.
Yeah, and I think law is baseline. And it's like, technically, it's unethical to cheat, but will I go to jail for cheating?
That's true.
Well, cheating on a partner, some people do try and take their partner to jail for that.
What?
Yeah.
It should be a
It's
crime.
funny. They're funny cases to read.
That's
And
actually,
then the thing is, law is different in each country.
yeah, this also like brings us back to like, or I don't know if we ever discussed this on the show, but like, a lot of conversations are having, can you separate like the creative or the artist from their artwork? And can you separate them from the politics that's happening? So it's like, we look at artists and we're like, okay, if they're not doing anything for like their community, let's say if they're a minority, if they're not doing anything for their community, should we like continue to support them even though they're like ignoring everything? And so yeah, this goes back to a lot of singers and rappers, and so
It's actually
It's
a really funny
interesting.
standard to have, because you don't go to your banker and say, well, what's your political views, or what are you doing for the community in order for me to support
does your
you?
banker have influence over millions of people?
So then they should be given that responsibility and that duty because they have that influence?
If you think so, I mean, I personally think you should have a responsibility to.
I think everyone has a responsibility, even the banker.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that responsibility is different depending on how many people they influence. So a famous artist.
It'll be done in different ways. Like the music artist can show it through their work that gets thousands.
But what
and
if
millions.
that music artist doesn't align with what you think?
I'm okay then? Then that's different. Then I wouldn't support them, or I don't know. That will make me question.
But see, that's directly related to their job. So if I know that I had something controversial to say that I can potentially lose all my work, then why would I go out and say it?
You're saying for an artist?
Yeah, because it's not like
Well,
their
I know.
art,
Well, I think you should stand on the
especially
right side of
musicians,
history. I think
is
you should.
themselves
The
No, I-
right side of history is the history that
wins.
wins, basically.
That's what they say.
What? Who says that?
That's literally the
I'm
right.
talking about the actual right side of history. Like I'm
Which
talking
no
about
one knows.
like if an artist chooses to sing in Israel or something and they're not part of BDS boycott, divestment sanctions. They've been told about this about the occupation and they've been told about this. They've been educated on it, and they're still choosing to like support a colonial state that engages in like.
I agree with you 100%.
So it's
But
like-
that's because that's a point of view I agree with. But let's say, for example, a country singer is a Republican and they come out and say, I'm a Republican, you should support this.
You should support Trump. Then yeah,
Or
yeah,
whatever Republican party. Like, they're not just going to go out and say that because they know that they have a lot of Democratic listeners that they'll lose.
So
I'm saying, as an artist, as someone who is so tied to their own
okay, but
production of what they're doing, it's, although they are held to this higher standard, it's kind of not fair.
wait, what do you mean? It's not-
that goes back to ethic. Can you separate the ethics in a person's personal views with their work?
Wait, why? Hold on. Why is like holding a person, an influencer, to basic human rights, to making sure that they uphold those basic human rights? Why is that such a huge standard? Like, why is that the
For
time we're
being a
living in?
Republican versus a Democrat?
No, I'm talking about other things like.
Well, I'm
It's
saying
like
for the Palestinian
supporting
one,
Black
I
Lives
agree
Matter.
with you.
Like some artists won't come out and support Black Lives Matter. Some artists won't, or they'll, you know what
but
I'm
they
saying?
won't dis-support it either. They just will stay silent.
But that's even worse sometimes. Like Taylor Swift just recently started saying, "No, you should go vote."
I agree,
Like
they
that's
should be
horrible,
doing
and she actually
things.
even admitted it in her documentary. I don't even watch many things.
I watch it.
But you watch the Taylor Swift documentary.
But point is, like she's like, why are you staying silent on women's issues? You're a woman, like you know what I'm saying? Just because like you're gonna lose some people, but yet you're still staying true to like basic morality.
I agree with you guys. They should speak up. I'm just giving you a different perspective as to why they might not.
Yeah, exactly. But hold on. You said it's unfair for them not speaking out or them not saying their opinions and their values to affect their work. But that's literally what happened to this guy. It's affecting his
No,
work.
I didn't. That was different. This is
Wait,
he
it's the
broke
same
the law,
thing.
molested somebody. This is they're just not speaking
Oh.
out about a topic.
Oh.
But like inherently, then
Like-
that
like I
means
said, the
that
spectrum.
means they're complicit and okay. Let's say they're okay with Israel, so they're supporting an occupation and an oppression of an entire people.
Okay, I took a step away from that because I said
stop taking a
that's
step back.
a very
Taking
because
too
that's
many
a
step
very
back.
extreme situation.
She's running.
And I know I'm sprinting to the other side
but
of this
some
conversation.
people, but that's because it's different in the sense because they're not directly oppressing Palestinians.
Do you guys speak out? Like, do you guys in class, like, teachers?
Well, that's what I was saying. If
It's
I'm
a-
in
let's be
class
real,
or
guys.
in law, let's say my opinion goes against every single person in class. I'm
You're-
just gonna sit back there. I'm gonna
I'm
be honest.
dead.
I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Good with me.
You guys are situations like, yeah, I mean,
But imagine being put in that situation 24/7. That what you're going to say is going to be listened to by millions and millions of people. So you have to like nitpick at what
Not
you're
just
going
that,
to say.
they scrutinize what you say, how you say it, like the tone, like everything is scrutinized and misinterpreted. So it's easier just to stay silent. But still, it shouldn't be that way.
They should be stronger
But-
than the regular person.
So here's one of the arguments that I posed going back to the assignment question. One of the arguments was, okay, well, if this person is unethical or immoral in their personal lives, who's to say what ethical boundaries they have overlooked when conducting their professional work that you may not be concerned with or you may not know
ooh,
of?
that's true.
So that goes back to saying that it's one person and you can't separate the two.
Yeah, I don't think you can completely. I think you can have different personas, like you guys were saying, professional and personal. But for the most part, I think your values, your morals, your ethics, if there's a fluctuation in a person, I think that's a red flag.
But you also hear about people who are really good at their job, but then they go home and they're an abuser. Like, they could
That's a
totally
problem.
separate that
It's
persona.
like personality disorder.
I mean, I definitely said this guy should seek psychological help because I don't think it's normal to begin with. But I don't think that's okay either.
It's so
I mean, just
weird
because
that
you-
one weighs on your conscience but the other doesn't.
Yeah. Like, how do you do so good at your job and want to help millions of people but molesting a little girl seems perfectly normal. And actually, when they were interviewing him, one of the scenes in the article was the girl confronting him, and she was wearing a police wire, and she was trying to get him to confess to it, and he wouldn't explicitly say he did anything, but he would say, like, I know there's a dark piece of me that needs to be entrapped.
I think it's interesting how like certain environments allow us to behave a certain way, and then sometimes when you know you can get away with it, or like you will abuse that power. Something that simply comes to my mind, I feel like a lot of us may do this at work. You'll never yell at your boss or raise your voice with your coworkers, like little will that happen, but like when you go home it might be easy to yell at your sibling, or you know what I mean,
even your parents. Yeah.
or your parents. Some environments don't allow for that, and you like naturally follow the rules and guidelines and ethics of that workplace, but a lot of those could be removed once you like enter a place that those, you know, the consequence, at least in this dunya, aren't there.
Yeah, so you'll have consequences at work. You can get fired and you have more to lose.
So now that we're all at home, it's all at home tests, right? So no teacher, no anything. You know it's supposed to be closed book, but no one's watching you.
You can get away with it.
Are you going to cheat on that test?
But I think that's why you need a higher power. So like I feel like that's where, you know, faith and spirituality comes. Like Islamically, there's like a lot of guidelines to like reach a higher level or a better level of morality, is you like, you know, God's watching you, and then you believe that there's an akhirah, so you'll be held accountable whether you get away with it or not. So that's why maybe at home you'll still respect your parents, you still won't cheat on that test. I think sometimes we need that higher level to have that taqwa, so you need to know that there's a hereafter and that you will be held accountable no matter who sees you.
But then that goes back to questioning our natural tendencies. Do you think we're naturally going to do bad, or we're naturally bad people?
We have a fitra where you like naturally know what the right thing to do is, but we also have a nafs that has certain desires. And then you also have, you know, the whispers of shaitan. So
like whatever outweighs the other one at that time.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you're constantly battling with yourself to do the right thing, and sometimes you may fall. And I think it's just going back. I'm going to bring this back to religion. Go back and make tawbah.
Okay, so people that don't follow a certain faith, can they never be ethical or moral?
No, I think people, you don't have to be within a certain faith to know what's right or wrong. I think Islamically, everybody has a fitrah, whether you're Muslim or not. I think we have a natural tendency to know what's right or wrong.
But you're saying because we have that sense of a higher power and that we're going to get punished for it in the hereafter, that we won't do it. What if people don't believe in a hereafter? What's going to stop them from acting ethical or doing the right thing?
Innately, do we believe that people are born with a certain set of morals and ethics that they follow by? That even if somebody, like nobody ever told you murder is wrong, do you believe that a person would know not to commit murder?
But society in general teaches you by like actions.
Yeah, so that's what morals are based off, what you surround yourself with.
Like a cannibalist society, murder is fine. Sacrifice
Or a
is fine.
sacrifice. Yeah, that's what actually I was just about to say.
Aztecs.
People, yeah, like the natives way back when would sacrifice some people for their religion. But would you consider that murder?
Yes.
Okay, but that was okay. That was acceptable to them.
So for that specific example, I do understand where you're coming from, and I see how you're saying that they themselves thought that that's what's appropriate.
I just think that goes to show how I don't truly think there is any sort of universal morals or ethics. I think it's just whatever society says is acceptable. And I think a lot of it stems from religion originally, which is why with the three major religions, it kind of just makes it, you seem universal. So like God told us not to kill each other, not to do this, not to do that. That's why it's like, okay, this is unethical because it's always been told to us it's unethical. But when you bring it to people that weren't touched by the monotheistic religions, sacrifice was okay. So I don't think there is a universally or like an innate thing about it.
I mean, that's a good point. I understand what you're saying, but I still feel like there should be certain things that we can collectively agree on are not good, that shouldn't be done. Like whether you follow monotheistic faith or not. Like even for the Aztec example, although this may be a spiritual action for them, I think collectively we can agree that you don't kill people for sacrifice.
But if that
regardless
person,
of what your belief
but if
is.
that person was okay with being sacrificed, if that's what they're okay with, I think our ethics are all stemmed on religion. So like religiously,
I don't think
Does
so.
the intention
I
make a
think
difference?
most of it is. I think most of it is.
if you're gonna say that, like, you have to understand that a lot of people in this country are atheists or agnostic.
Now,
So
at
if
this
you're-
point, I think
Yeah.
now they took what they wanted from the religion without acknowledging that that's where it stemmed from. I'm not, and they took the religious, like, they took away the religious actions of like praying or this or that, but like a lot of the other stuff that came from religion, such
Like
as
the humanity.
no, I think
Profound,
like
yeah.
before Islam, these people were doing all these crazy things, and then afterwards, it was only the religious people that were quote unquote ethical. Now we're just removing, I guess, the formal.
But I wouldn't say that, because if you go to the roots of a lot of organized religion, it's very oppressive. Like some organized religions, like the Crusades, or for example. So if you're gonna say, and I'm not gonna say it all stemmed from there, but say it was all.
I'm not
rooted in
saying
religion,
I'm not
I
saying
feel like
religious
it takes
people.
away.
No. I'm not even talking about the actions of religious people. I'm talking about religion being sent down from God.
So we talked a lot about heavy topics today. A lot of things that philosophers have argued about for hundreds and hundreds of years. But bringing it back to a nice little game of, is this ethical and what would you do? The first question, your friend is not showing up to class. They ask you, can you sign me in? Would you do it?
I'd be annoyed that they'd ask me that, and I'd be afraid of the consequence, so I wouldn't do it. But I'm scared. Like, how about if I if I drop the course, like if the teacher drops me, or
If the teacher drops you,
I feel like that's one of the most like basic minimal things that there aren't really consequence, like cheating maybe there's more consequence to that, or plagiarism or things like
But
that.
even signing, forging somebody's signature and saying that they
Oh
were
my
there when they're
God.
really
Honestly,
not.
after a certain grade, attendance should not be mandatory.
I
To
agree.
begin with.
so we
Yeah.
just don't like the principle.
But there
of
are,
that.
there are mandatory attendance. This actually brings me back to the show What Would You Do? Have you guys watched it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that show was always interesting.
It was interesting, and I've always wished to like be on that show just to see what I would do.
No, I literally watched the show What Would You Do? And it was about a domestic violence, but they flipped the role. So they had a woman hitting a man out in public.
Oh.
What would you do? In the show, nobody, not one person, stopped to say something. So I'm like, I would have said something. I would have stepped in. Literally 2 days later, I seen a girl beating up this tall guy. She's like 5'2", and this guy's like 6 something. And she's like, how could you do that to me? And she's like slapping him. And I was like,
You didn't do anything.
yeah, I was like, how could he do it?
I bet you deserved it.
I went back and reflected. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, that's why I always wish like I was on that, like put in a situation to see what you do, because you never know what you would do when you're put in the spot. But I would sign.
I do it strategically, so I'll get like 2 different colored pens.
See, like,
and
my-
sign in, so
My
they don't
classes
know.
are very small, so if they weren't there, the teacher would know
yeah,
you're not.
but like technically it's unethical. We still do it. Does that make us unethical people?
It's showing your
I
loyalty.
think everything. So here's the thing: people are not all bad or all good. So everything should just be on the scale. You have all the negatives, all the positives, and in the end, we just want the positives to outweigh the negatives.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we're more good than bad. So like.
So we're good people.
Next question. Someone is omitting information that's relevant on their dating profile.
Oh,
Oh, you need to be like honest,
like
with that.
omitting or lying. Like those are two separate. I think they're two different things. Because if you don't know something that you want to know, you can ask.
But chances are, if someone's admitting it, it's important.
Like if it's gonna affect the relationship and make a difference, you need to open up and share that. Maybe you don't have to put it in your profile, but
Like you
do.
have a child or something.
Oh, girl, that's serious.
But you don't
That
put it.
changes things.
Well, let's
Yeah,
say
that's
you're
unethical.
21 on this dating profile. You wouldn't assume that a 21-year-old would have like a child, so you never asked, and they never said.
Maybe they don't have to
That's-
put it on their profile, but when we're having like conversations, I think that's an important topic
I think it
to
should
bring
come
up.
up. Yeah.
Like,
Like,
the
don't-
first thing.
Not the first.
Yeah,
it should be like
definitely
pretty
be,
early
like,
on.
top 3.
It should be pretty early on. They're probably omitting it for a reason.
Yeah,
because they know.
But then do you want to date a person or
I know
marry
a
a person that
guy-
doesn't?
So
I know
would
I-
that be unethical?
I know a guy that was talking to my friend, and he was like interested, but he was divorced. He was married for a few years and then was divorced, and he didn't open up about that. He did. He ended up talking to her about it, but it wasn't from the start. Like he waited.
Did he wait for her
a
to
few,
bring it up?
No, he waited a few conversations and then like shared.
But it was still pretty early.
Yeah, it was still pretty early.
Oh, was she okay with that? Like, did she mind it?
Yeah, she was okay with it.
Oh, okay.
I feel like that's
Her
kind
family
of
wasn't.
strategic though on somebody's part. So if I know you're gonna judge me for something, I want you to meet me first,
Yeah.
like me first, and then I will
Because
say whatever it is that I know you would have judged me for.
No, I think you should open up. It just has to be early on.
Yeah, I would have to say, I think that's unethical, Mariam. Don't have someone begin to develop feelings and fall for you and then be like, oh yeah, by the way.
And
That's
some people,
strategically
you're gonna be a dad.
unethical.
and some people may lie about their profession and say they're.
Or puff up what their profession is.
Oh, people that try to make it seem like it's something
But
different.
they do that for a reason. That's because they feel like people don't respect that profession.
Yeah, like I'm a street pharmacist. No, you can't. You can't do that. No, just be honest with what your job is.
That's illegal. That's illegal. Yeah, that is wrong.
There's a reason people don't say that out loud.
They're drug dealers. Or the same thing, like let's say they're applying for a job and they don't disclose the fact that they were in jail. Like there are reasons for not disclosing these things.
Like
But
you're.
that doesn't make it any more right.
Well, but
That's
it
it.
makes it understandable.
I guess.
It makes it understandable and more like, okay, I get why you would do that.
It makes it understandable, but does it make it right?
No, it's not right.
I think it makes it like I can work with you sort of thing.
I'm gonna meet you halfway.
A lot of these things are very nuanced, and it's like if you generally think people are good, just work with them, unless it's like one of those drastic things like this guy molested this girl or murder, like things like that. Overall, most things are pretty nuanced. Ethics is like this whole like thing that everyone tries to live up to, but like we said, we don't all obey it
And
to
I
the
think-
max.
and
So it's like,
sometimes-
how are we to judge others?
I just think it's interesting that the more you grow up and the more we get together and host these podcasts and talk about these different topics, that you come to realize that things are never or are very rarely black and white. Like when you're usually in conversation or when you think about things hypothetically, it's always, oh, this is wrong, this is right.
When you're a kid, that's what you're taught.
Yeah, and then when you grow up and we start to have conversations like these, and even when we start to pick out realistic situations from our lives, it's so like, oh my God, there's so much more to a situation, or there's so much more gray area than there is black and white.
Or
And I
you don't
feel like
want
that's a
someone-
part of growing up, honestly.
You don't want someone to look at your situation in only a black and white scope.
Yeah.
You want them to
But-
also consider all of the 70 excuses that we have Islamically.
Yeah, but it is kind of refreshing when you like look at the way little kids think, and because they don't know all of the
Yeah.
backstory of things, so it's kind of like refreshing when they're like, no, this is wrong, why did he do that?
Like, it's very naive, like,
yeah,
it's wrong, it should just be wrong.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter what got you to that point or whatnot. I think it's interesting to see your thought process mature as you grow up and as you get experiences. And especially, I mean, ethics is just one of the many topics that we've discussed, that we've went back and forth on. And it's something that you would never think comes with much conversation. Like, you usually think there's just a standard that you just don't do these things regardless.
but like it could be quote unquote mature versus like also corrupted.
I mean, mature
Oh,
sounds
boy.
better. Mature sounds better.
No, like some people do become corrupted with like their ethics.
Yeah, as they grow up. But it's just to think that anytime you're being asked about something or anytime you put yourself in a situation, like really take into consideration the whole situation and understanding before you're so quick to draw judgment or to raise claims. But thank you so much to everyone for tuning in and listening to this week's episode of To Whom It May Concern. Please subscribe, like, and follow us on social media. We appreciate all the support we've been receiving so far, and if you don't already follow us, you could find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Modern Skeps. If for whatever reason you don't have access to the podcast app, we actually upload our full-length episodes on YouTube. If you have any ideas you'd like us to discuss, please email us at modernskeptics@gmail.com. Sincerely, The Modern Skeptics. P.S. Ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do.